Hi, I'm Will from the Prince George's County Memorial Library System, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make a pizza at home. So pizza, very simply, you already know this, has a crust, a sauce, some cheese, and some toppings. So today I'm going to walk you through making a crust, making your own sauce, and then we're going to put it all together and bake up a pizza here at home. So let's start with the sauce, which is going to take the longest.
Okay, so for the base of our sauce, we're going to be using one medium white onion, fairly finely diced, as well as one rib of celery, also finely diced. And we're going to saute the vegetables on medium-low heat for about 10 to 15 minutes. So add a quarter cup of olive oil to a Dutch oven or heavy bottomed pan, put the vegetables in, a little salt, and stir it on up. And we'll let it cook down for about 10 to 15 minutes. So while that's happening, we're gonna just roughly chop up some garlic. It doesn't have to be too fine. And we're gonna prepare our tomatoes. So I use San Marzano tomatoes exclusively. I usually mash these whole tomatoes up with my hand so I can feel the consistency and get it to a place where I want it, but you can also use an immersion blender or a masher. You just want it to be a nice sort of pureed or whatever sort of texture you prefer for your final marinara product. So once your onions and celery have gotten some color, become translucent, we're going to add the garlic that we prepared and cook that for about a minute. So once the garlic has been cooking for about a minute, you want to go ahead and add 2 teaspoons of sugar, 1 teaspoon of salt, and a little medley of Italian herbs. I used basil and oregano here, probably about a teaspoon total. I also used around a teaspoon of anchovy paste, but that's just sort of a personal preference, so don't worry if you have to omit that. Also used some white wine vinegar, about 2 teaspoons there. I really like the vinegar taste, so maybe I put in a little extra, and also some red pepper flakes for heat. So once that's all in, you want to give that a stir and let that all sort of cook down together. So once the liquid has evaporated, you're going to go ahead and add about a tablespoon of tomato paste and stir that up and cook that down for minute, 2 minutes once it's looking nice and rust colored. And then it's time to add your tomatoes. So carefully dump those in, stir it up, mix everything together, bring the whole thing up to a simmer so it's just bubbling, and then drop the heat to low and cook it down for about 2 hours. So while our sauce cooks down, we are going to make the dough. So I'm adding 1 teaspoon of sugar to 3/4 a cup of lukewarm water. To that cup, I'm also adding 1 packet of Dry Active Yeast. I'm gonna stir it up and wait a little bit until these bubbles form, and the bubbles let me know that the yeast is activated and ready to help our bread rise. So here I have 2 cups of bread flour, to which I'm adding a teaspoon of salt, stirring that up to get the salt and the flour all mixed together. And then I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of olive oil to our yeast and water mixture. And then I'm going to put our yeast, water, oil mixture into the bowl with the flour and salt. Then we're going to stir it and stir it up until a sort of shaggy mass forms that we can flip out onto the counter and start to knead. So I'm going to put about 1/4 cup of flour down on my work surface with the dough that we're going to work into this dough as we knead it. And as you can see, the kneading is just sort of a pressing and a folding motion. So your dough shouldn't be too sticky, but it should definitely stay together, be sticky and smooth and sort of supple when you're done. So form it into a nice ball after maybe about 5 minutes of kneading. And then grab another clean bowl, drizzle some olive oil in there, Rub it around on the sides. This is so the dough won't stick when you're pulling it out. Drop your dough in there, and then put your cleanest dish towel over it. Put it to the side, and we'll let that rise for about an hour.
All right, so our dough is done rising. Our sauce is still going, but it's cooked down to a point where we can use it for the pizza. So we are ready to assemble. So I'm gonna be using a 12-inch cast iron pan today. So I'm gonna start by sort of preheating that. So when we put the dough in there, it's already gonna be hot and able to create a nice crisp crust. So I'm using the cast iron, which is good for the high heat and the heat retention, but you can use any pan that you want. Just make sure that you shape your dough accordingly. So here's our dough. It's doubled in size, maybe a little bit more. So I'm gonna punch it down a little bit, get it back to normal. And I'm gonna put a little olive oil on my surface so I can stretch it out without it sticking to the counter. So that's looking pretty good. It looks like it'll fit in my cast iron. So I'm gonna put a little oil in here. All right, so the dough goes in the cast iron or whatever pan you're using, and now I'm gonna form it up a little bit in here, create a little crust for myself. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you know, I wanna use all the surface area I can, make as big a pizza as possible. So the next part is the sauce. So I'm gonna take my pan over here to where we've got our sauce going. And I spent so much time on this sauce, I'm gonna use a decent amount, but you know, whatever you feel, whatever you think is right, you should use that amount. And then 2 little scoops. Back over here. Sort of spread that sauce out. I like to get it all the way up to the corners. Makes the crust a little bit more interesting. All right, and so I'm gonna do a little bit of cheese. Again, you can put however much and whatever different kinds of cheese you want. I'm using just a low moisture mozzarella, really simple, but you know, your favorite type of cheese can go on as well. And then whatever toppings you'd like to work with. I've got some thinly sliced red onion, jalapeno pepper, and some sliced kielbasa. So I'm actually do the kielbasa first. Onion. And jalapeno. Pickled jalapeno. All right, I'm gonna hit it with a little bit of salt. Just there. And also have some garlic powder that I'm gonna use and put on the sides just so the crust has a little bit of extra flavor. All right, and so that's fully prepped.
So the best place for a prepped pizza is in a hot oven. So I'm going to place the cast iron on the top rack of my preheated oven set at 500 degrees, and we're going to let that go for about 10 to 12 minutes. You want to be checking on it to see when it's cooked to your desired level. And once it's done, you can pull it out, turn off the oven, and take that pizza out of the pan and then do any sort of finishing touches you want. I'm putting some fresh basil on top, and then it will be ready for you to eat. So there's our final product.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rachel Zukowski, and I work in Prince George's County Memorial Library System. And thanks for joining us today for our pizza making party. So Will already showed you some ways to make more of a traditional pizza, including making the pizza sauce from scratch and also a traditional type of crust. And so what I'm going to show you is a little bit of a twist on the traditional pizza that we all know and love. Some people prefer to have less gluten in their diet or can't have flour because of celiac disease or other reasons. So what we'll be making today is a flourless pizza crust. We'll be using cauliflower. So you can see I've got a lot of the ingredients here in front of me. This involves a lot of toppings because I like a lot of toppings, but you can decide how many you would like on your pizza. So what we'll need for this crust is cauliflower. And I have it in a bag, like a already pre-cut up cauliflower. And that's just stored in the cupboard. You can find that in most stores. You could also use frozen riced cauliflower, or you can take a full head of cauliflower and chop it up, put it in the microwave, and then we'll drain it. I'll show you how to do that. So we will need about a cup of shredded mozzarella cheese, a quarter cup of Parmesan cheese, shredded, some Italian seasonings like oregano, red pepper flakes if you like it spicy, and some basil, salt, pepper, and an egg, and that binds the crust together. So first what we'll need to do is drain and make sure the cauliflower is as dry as it can be. As you can figure out, cauliflower takes the place of the actual wheat flour. And in order to make it dry, I've got a sieve and a very clean kitchen towel. First, kind of pour the cauliflower into the sieve. So you can see it's starting to drip off into the bowl. And you can either use a wooden spoon to start pushing more of the liquid out. At this point, I'm going to take my kitchen towel and wrap the rice cauliflower in that towel. You can also use a cheesecloth if you have it. You can also use regular paper towels in a pinch, but they're not quite as sturdy. So you see from here, whoa, I'm getting a lot of liquid out of this cauliflower. It's much easier to get the liquid out of it when you use a towel to squeeze. Now, of course, we don't want to keep this excess liquid. You can see how much has been squeezed off. And now we have a rather dry ball of cauliflower in there. It should equal just about 2.5 cups. And you can adjust the recipe accordingly. To this, we will add 1 egg, and there's my oven set to 425. A cup of mozzarella, and then a quarter cup of Parmesan. And Parmesan is a little drier of a cheese, and it will give a more crispy result to your crust. Right. So put these aside. You'll want the rest of that mozzarella for your toppings. The difference, besides being gluten-free, that this crust has, as opposed to the more traditional flour crust, is that you bake this crust prior to putting on the sauce and the toppings. Well, it'll start to come together now. Of course, at this point, you can start adding your seasonings. So, a couple shakes of oregano and basil.
And this will make it smell really, really good and taste just as good too. And then I'll put some of my red pepper flakes just for some extra heat. All right, so let's get it mixed up and kind of see what it looks like.
If you want to make just breadsticks out of this mixture, you can also do that and just skip the toppings. All right, so now we are ready to bring out our pan. If you have pizza stone, that's fine, but you can just use a baking sheet covered with tin foil or parchment paper. That helps get the crust off because the cheese and the cauliflower mixture has a little bit of a tendency to stick.
So just dump that crust mixture right onto your baking sheet. And if you just have a baking sheet, you probably want to use some sort of cooking spray to make sure that it doesn't stick.
From here, it's fun to just pat it out.
I like it as a circle, but you can also make it as a rectangle or a square. And I like to leave it a little bit thick, maybe like a 1/4 inch, to really get the crust all adhered together.
Because the only binding agent in here is 1 egg. And then the cheese will melt and start binding it together as well. And my oven is all ready.
So you can see what that will look like going into the oven.
Alrighty, let's see what happens. Keep it in the oven for about 10 to 15 minutes, and we'll be back to top and finish off our pizza. So it's been about 15 minutes since I put the pizza crust in the oven.
And you can see that it's got some nice browning around the edges here, and it's pretty crispy.
And pretty nice color, golden brown. So at this point, we want to put our lovely toppings on. And you saw in Will's video how he makes his pizza sauce from scratch using canned tomatoes, onions, garlic, sugar, a few other ingredients. I'm using mine from a jar, but you can feel free to use that recipe that he provided as well. So we're just gonna go ahead and start putting it on. And for the cheese, once this is spread, you can either go for using the rest of the mozzarella that you have left over from the crust,
Or I'm gonna do some fresh mozzarella that I've cut into slices, just to change up the type of cheese a little bit.
and I don't like my pizzas too saucy, so I'm doing a very, very light layer. Obviously, you can put on as much as you like.
So for toppings, I mentioned the fresh mozzarella, so I'm going to just layer that around. And I still have some Parmesan left, so I might as well just sprinkle that around as well.
I've also got some thinly sliced onions. I'm gonna try kind of a half and half pizza. So some things are on one half, and then we'll do different toppings on the other half. Keep it interesting.
I've also got some diced mushrooms.
Some
Sliced green onions. That's really more for color than anything else.
has a nice little flavor too. And then some sliced salami pieces.
Cool thing about pizza is that any way you like. So if you don't eat meat, or if you'd like a different type of meat on yours, go for it.
We are pretty much ready to go back in the oven. So once you've got your toppings situated, I'm gonna put a little bit more shredded mozzarella just because I have a lot left. Might as well make this as loaded as possible. That goes back in the oven for 10 more minutes, and we'll see you in 10 and see how this phenomenal cauliflower crust pizza turned out.